Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this kind of really critical next step of this bison management planning process. I think you're here obviously because you care about the outcomes of this process that we're engaged in right now. I think most of you probably have some familiarization with bison management in Yellowstone and the different iterations that we've been through over many decades. 100 years ago, and we nearly wiped out all bison in Yellowstone, less than 25 animals, and now we have thousands, and that's a huge success story. I think for historical context, it's important to really think about, you think that let's just take the 1990s, 60% or so of the bison population in Yellowstone has a disease called brucellosis, which was originally transmitted to them by cattle. And the disease, under the right conditions, can be transmitted to livestock. And that has been a major concern of bison moving outside the park, and historically has been a primary reason why the bison numbers in the park have been kept on a lower end. In the 1990s, our primary method for population control was basically killing bison right on the boundary. The 96-97 winter, we lost nearly half of the bison population in a single winter. A lot of partners, including the state of Montana and the USDA and the public, put together a planning process in the 90s that ended up with an environmental impact statement and record of decision that was signed in 2000 that generally identified a target population at the time of 3,000 bison for the park. That number was at that point generally thought to be the number that would prevent large migrations out of the park and would also maintain the genetic integrity of bison in Yellowstone. As we progressed into the 2000s, that plan was based on a framework of adaptive management and an interagency bison management planning group, IBMP, that over several decades has made substantial decisions. Tribes became part of that group in around 2009, and in that range, our primary method for controlling the population was shipment to slaughter. I think in 2008 we shipped somewhere around 1,500 bison in a single year to slaughter, and we've progressed significantly since then. 2015, the state of Montana expanded tolerance on the west and the north sides to give bison some room to move outside the park. We've started a great live transfer program called the Bison Conservation Transfer Program, which allows us to bring bison in, test them through a protocol over multiple years, and then once they're deemed brucellosis free, they're transferred to tribes around the country with our partners in the Assiniboine and Sioux at Fort Peck and the Intertribal Buffalo Council. That's been very successful, and that now we have 8 tribes that are exercising their treaty rights on the boundary every year. I think that'll be 9 next year. And so we've migrated, especially over this last 4 or 5 years, from more of a using hunters for harvest, both tribal and state hunters, and the live transfer program as the primary means of transferring bison, controlling the bison population. I think most of you probably realize this is there are a lot of opinions on bison management. This plan does not solve every problem. It does not, satisfy everyone. There are people on both sides of this issue. Some want, unlimited bison in the park. Some want far fewer bison, and we're trying to strike a balance and really, in many ways, solidify progress that's been made over the last 2 decades plus. And I think this plan does that. We've got alternatives that will be covered here shortly that I think do recognize the successes we've had, and it continues to allow for adaptive management into the future. And I think that balancing that and balancing the perspectives, understanding how important bison are to tribes, understanding how important bison are to visitors. When visitors are asked what's the single most important thing for you to see when they come to Yellowstone, the number one is bison, followed by Old Faithful. And, very important that we understand the different perspectives, that we continue to understand that brucellosis can be transmitted under the right conditions, that we manage that interface, that we recognize that there are perspectives of ranchers and some of the livestock industry and the concerns around bison, and we continue to work closely together and develop alternatives that maintain the great partnerships that we have with tribes, with the state, with USDA, with the public on this issue. At the same time, do the best job that we can to maximize and capitalize on the successes that we've had and built on up to this point. So with that, I'm going to introduce Jennifer Carpenter. She's our chief of the Yellowstone Center for Resources. She'll go through a slide deck, and then we'll get on to some Q&A with you afterwards. So Jennifer, go ahead. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Cam. That was a great introduction. I really appreciate it. Lori, can you advance the slide, please? Perfect. So again, my name is Jennifer Carpenter. I'm the chief of the Yellowstone Center for Resources. If you could go back one, Lori, to the panelists. Thank you. I am going to ask all the panelists to turn on their cameras, please, and introduce themselves and what they do for the park. And I'm going to start with PJ White. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'm PJ White, the Natural Resources Program Manager for the park.
Chris?
Good morning. I'm Chris Jeremiah. I am the Program Coordinator for Bison in the Yellowstone Center for Resources. I'm also a Senior Wildlife Biologist.
Thank you. Tim, we can't see you. We see a pretty picture of bison.
Well, that's you're probably better off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Tim Reed. I'm a Bison Program Coordinator working out of the Superintendent's office with the Bison team.
Thanks. Tobin.
Good morning. My name is Tobin Roop. I'm the branch chief for cultural resources here at Yellowstone, and as part of that, manage our government-to-government relationship with our associated tribes.
Christine.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Christine Gabriel, and I'm the compliance branch chief here in Yellowstone.
And last, Kelly.
Hi, good morning, Kelly Daigle. I'm the project manager for the National Environmental Policy Act process. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we can move forward. Perfect, thanks. So as Cam mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the EIS and going over the alternatives, reiterating some of the stuff that Cam already mentioned in his introduction for project background. What is the IVMP? How did it come into being? What is the draft EIS? What are the alternatives? And then next steps and how you all can provide public comments. And then we'll close with a question and answer session, as Kelly mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast. Okay, next slide, please. Perfect. So as Cam mentioned, Yellowstone bison are special. They are our national mammal. They are important to many people in terms of their cultural significance and natural significance to the landscape. Obviously tribes, because they are descendants from the ancestral populations that supported those tribes. And unfortunately, as Cam mentioned, cattle infected Yellowstone bison and elk with brucellosis right around 1917. It was brought over by cattle. And unfortunately, brucellosis induces abortions and is present in about 10% of female bison in our Yellowstone population. Because of that infection rate and the transmission to cattle, Montana sued the National Park Service in 1995 over concerns that infected bison leaving the park would interact with cattle and infect those cattle with brucellosis and affect the livestock trade across state lines and within Montana. So the parties, through that lawsuit, negotiated a plan, which I'll get into in a minute, to maintain a wild bison population with a negligible risk of brucellosis transmission to cattle. So that is the IBMP. It was signed in December 2000 by the Secretaries of Agriculture and the Interior and the state of Montana. It allowed for bison to migrate into small areas adjacent to the park during winter, and it required management of that bison population, including capture, test and slaughter, vaccination, and hazing in that particular plan, or called for that in that particular plan. The IBMP did anticipate adaptive management strategies and adjustments over time when knowledge or circumstances have changed. And as Cam mentioned, 2 tribes and ITBC were added as partners to the IBMP in 2009. There was and has been great success under the IBMP. No brucellosis transmission from bison to cattle to date. The bison population has averaged about 5,000 bison over that time frame, using a larger area since 2012, with fewer conflicts with people. There have been fewer bison shipped to slaughter as of late, as Cam mentioned, to reduce numbers, as the partners prioritizing tribal hunting has increased, and the transfer of live brucellosis-free bison to tribes through a conservation program. Tribes are now a lot more engaged in the co-stewardship of bison, including the development of our adaptive management plans and annual operating plans. Next slide. Oh, go back one. Perfect. And to follow on, there have been significant changed circumstances since that plan was signed in 2000, and new information has come to light, including that the primary threat of brucellosis to cattle is from free-ranging elk, not bison. That is due in part to the success of the IBMP. In 2006, tribes began harvesting bison on unoccupied lands in Montana, pursuant to their federal treaties, as I mentioned earlier. In 2010, APHIS changed its regulations to reduce the risk of the state of Montana losing its brucellosis-free status for cattle, so that, again, lowered the risk to trade when cattle were infected with brucellosis. And in 2015, the state of Montana allowed for additional tolerance of bison outside of the park in Montana because of the fewer cattle in the area and due in part to conservation easements. And in that 2010 change by APHIS about the risk of Montana losing its brucellosis-free status. And then our newest program in 2019 is the Bison Conservation Transfer Program, essentially the quarantine program that began providing disease-free live bison to tribes. That's been a significant success for us over the evolution of this past 20 years. Next slide. Issues and concerns remain, though, and we do address those in this EIS. So obviously abundance and distribution of bison, how many bison and where are they located, brucellosis transmission, shipments to slaughter to manage the bison population, hunting outside of the park, tribal engagement and co-stewardship, and capacity of those tolerance zones outside of the park within the state of Montana. So the new bison management plan builds upon the 2000 plan. Its purpose is to preserve a sustainable population of free-ranging bison while continuing to address the brucellosis transmission risk, address human safety and property damage, and support tribal hunting outside of the park. The need for this new plan is to consolidate knowledge and change circumstances that I just went over the 2 decades of the 2000 plan into a contemporary plan. The focus will be on actions that the Park Service may take to manage bison within the boundaries of Yellowstone National Park. Expected outcomes of this new plan, as I mentioned, a contemporary plan based on updated circumstances, adaptive management, comprehensive knowledge and research over the past 2 decades of lessons learned. Outcome will also include a viable bison population with increased ecological role and benefits on the landscape. We will continue to meet the IBMP objectives. We will minimize the transmission of brucellosis to cattle. We will also support a free-ranging wild bison herd. We will also allow for more aggressive management actions to be taken. If necessary, you'll see those built into the alternatives as we go forward. And then lastly, enhance co-stewardship of bison with tribes through increased hunting opportunities outside of the park and restoration of live bison to tribal lands across the United States. Impact topics analyzed in this document include, of course, Yellowstone bison, other wildlife, threatened and endangered species under the Endangered Species Act, American Indian tribes and ethnographic resources, human health and safety, socioeconomics of the region and the park, visitor use and experience, and certainly vegetation and habitat. So actions common to all alternatives. So these are items and actions that are across all of the alternatives, including the no action. So we will continue to meet the IBMP objectives as I've outlined earlier. We will continue to support tribal treaty rights. We will continue to increase output from the Bison Conservation Transfer Program and work with our partners to expand capacity of that program. We will continue to use adaptive management and conduct forage and grazing research. Continue to maintain the genetic diversity of the Yellowstone herd. We will also continue to work with APHIS under USDA on brucellosis testing protocols to manage the Bison Conservation Transfer Program and provide for additional live bison to be transferred to tribes. We'll continue to work with tribes on coordination and collaborative management. And we will continue to work with the state of Montana, who would determine management actions outside of the park and work with tribes to determine the location, extent of hunting outside of the park. Under Alternative 1, this is essentially our no action alternative. This is the current management paradigm that we're under the 2000 IBMP. And that calls for 3,500 to 5,000 bison after calving, so post-calving population counts. Primarily use capture and slaughter to manage those bison population numbers. Continue to increase bison transfer to tribal lands as under the actions common to all, and continue to support tribal hunting by allowing bison migration into the state of Montana as we have done in the past. Alternative 2 is maintaining about 3,500 to 6,000 bison. The goal is to reduce shipments to slaughter and rely more on increasing bison transfer to tribal lands by expanding the quarantine capacity and supporting tribal hunting with larger population levels, facilitating larger migrations and thus increasing the hunting opportunities outside of the park. Alternative 3 would increase that population number to about 7,000 bison on the high end, so 35 to 7,000. It would cease shipments to slaughter, so we would no longer be doing capture and ship to slaughter. We would rely on regulating population numbers through hunting outside of the park and bison transfer to tribal lands, live bison transfer, supporting tribal hunting with larger numbers, facilitating larger migrations, and thus increasing those opportunities for harvest outside of the park. And we would, under this alternative, if necessary, retain the ability to reinstate shipments to slaughter if hunting or bison transfer is not effective at regulating bison numbers. So if we realize that the bison population is expanding beyond that 7,000, we would potentially reinstate that shipment to slaughter as a reduction mechanism, but we would not generally use it under this alternative 3. Thanks. So we have a lot of cooperating agencies under this IBMP. So of course we have the APHIS Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, that is the disease managers, if you will, for the federal government. We have tribes, Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, Umatilla tribe. We have the Custer-Gallatin National Forest, ITBC, which is the Intertribal Buffalo Council, Nez Perce tribe, the state of Montana, and the Yakama Nation are all cooperating agencies, which means they have participated in the development of this EIS through meetings and through a review of this document prior to its release to you all, the general public. And they will continue to cooperate with us as we move forward in these next steps. So we'll continue to engage those agencies, including looking at the comments that you all provide, developing the final EIS, and developing our selected action and our record of decision. So cooperating agencies will go throughout the entire process. Next steps, in addition to continuing to engage the agencies, will be reviewing of the public comments that you all provide on this draft. Based on that, we will prepare a final EIS and select a preferred alternative under that final EIS. We will then publish that final EIS and notice of availability in the Federal Register sometime in summer 2024. And then after a 30-day waiting period, after publication of that final EIS, we will publish a record of decision indicating our selected action for implementation under the plan. And that we expect to be next summer, summer of 2024. So again, we're reiterating how to comment. Please submit or a preferred method is submitting your comments electronically through this website. You may mail in or hand deliver written comments to the address below. And we ask that the public submit comments by September 25th, 2023.